Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be looking at all of the uncommon, rare, and mythic rare spoilers from Kaldheim that came out today, and any notable commons as well. So essentially I'm going to talk about each card, what I think about it, how it works, maybe explain why I like or dislike the card, and yeah, we're going to do that for all of the cards that have come out today, and any that were released like last night. So yeah, why don't we just jump right into this? Starting off, we have Valkyries Sword. It's a 2-cost white artifact equipment, and when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 4 and a white. If you do, create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance, then attach Valkyries Sword to it. So what's interesting about that part, and by the way, the equipment itself just gives something +2/+1, and it can equip for 3. So if you ignore that first part, it is a pretty bad card. I mean, +2/+1 for 2 isn't bad, but an equip cost of 3 is extremely high. The thing is, in order to get that 4/4, or with the sword, 6/5, you need to pay 7 mana. And yes, you are getting 2 cards for 7 mana, so that's, and it is a 6/5. But I just wouldn't call that a good deal. I don't think this card is good in any way outside of maybe the fact that if you're running an equipment deck, this gets you both a creature and an equipment, which sometimes you have trouble finding one or the other. But generally, I don't think I would run it. It's way too expensive. So yeah, I'm just not a big fan of it. It's even too expensive for an angel deck. You're paying 7 mana. There's a lot of, 7-drop kind of things that you'd much rather play over this. So you can kind of discount that whole first ability, and then outside of that, it's a pretty generic card. So maybe inside a limited, you can get something going with this, but just not a very good card. Next, we have Guard Armory. It's a land, and it enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for white. And then you can pay 1 red, and a white to tap and sacrifice it to search your library for an aura card and or an equipment card, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So yeah, pretty good. I mean, you are sacrificing a land to go tutor, but what's really interesting about it is that it's a tutor on a land. We've been getting, by the way, a lot more tutors recently, especially for things like equipments and auras. It seems like this will be a cycle of 5, of 10, and this is one of the better ones that I've seen. Of course, it entering the land battlefield tapped does kind of suck, and it does come in competition with most of the Modal double face cards from Zendikar Rising, where, you can have it enter the battlefield tapped, or you get another card. This one is always going to be a land, but it can give you another effect. So it's very similar to the Modal double face cards, but it always enters as a land, and then later on you can choose to cast it. So I would almost prefer to have this in, a deck, but obviously you need to be in the right kind of deck. But unless your deck is super focused on being aggro, where you don't want the, the tap to land, I think that you can really easily get away with running this. Next we have Usher of the Fallen. It's a 1-cost white creature, spirit warrior, 2/1. So a 2/1 for 1. Already not awful. It has Boast, pay 1 and a white, and create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So Boast means you can activate it only once per turn and only if the creature attacked. I would say this is a pretty good card. I mean, think about it in a mono white kind of rush deck, right? You play this turn 1, turn 2 you attack with it. Because it attacked, you also create a 1/1. Now, obviously paying 2 mana for a 1/1 isn't great, but the fact that you're not spending a card means you can get some long-term value out of it. So at this point, you've spent 3 mana on a 2/1 and a 1/1, and that 2/1 can keep creating 1/1s. So I honestly don't think it's that bad of a start to a mono white deck. There might be better plays for you to make, but it is definitely an option where, you're getting a 2/1, a 2-power creature on turn 1, which is, there's some pretty good value to that. And then you can also then get an extra power the next turn, assuming it's a free swing. So yeah, I actually think this is one of the better Boast cards. It definitely isn't a flashy card, but it's one that I feel like could generate you some value and kind of helps in those situations, even in limited, where maybe the board is a little bit stalled because no one's drawing any cards. Of course, this thing does need to successfully attack, so later in the game it might be a little bit harder. But if you get to that point, how helpful are the 1/1s? So, yeah. Next we have this god card. It is Redane, God of Justice, and it's a legendary creature god 2/3 with flying and vigilance, and it says snow lands that opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Now, snow lands, okay, so what I've basically said in the past is snow basics there's no downside to running them. For instance, I said, oh, this is a really good green card, and it would be really good in mono green, but it has snow mana. Well, that's not a problem, because in mono green, you just swap all your normal basics for snow basics. And, you know, because there was no real downside to running them. But this is finally a downside. And why this is such an important thing is that in something like Modern, I believe it is, where there is some powerful snow decks, or at least some powerful snow cards, it was very important to run snow lands, even if you weren't running snow. Why? Because you could bluff having certain cards in your deck, which could be very, very relevant. While it is a very slight, you know, advantage, it is technically an advantage. And there were like no cards that really punished you for doing that. By having this be a card, if, you know, snow decks first off ever become meta, this is an awesome counter that could totally fit in a sideboard. And second, it also like, it just disencourage, like, it says, yes, there is a slight advantage to only running snowlands, but you do also have this disadvantage that your opponent could be running this. And so I feel like by just having this card printed, it means that it is viable to run non-snow basics, because I'm sure there are going to be people who put snow basics in their land for or in their deck for no reason, and then run across Radine, God of Justice, and now they're at a disadvantage for no reason. And so I think that's enough to kind of balance that out. So I think this is really good, and it's pretty cheap. The issue is it is not a colorless card, meaning that only if you're running against white do you actually have to worry about this effect. But I do think that it's a wonderful sideboard card for a lot of reasons. This card is going to be in sideboards because it has other attacks. It says opponents have to pay 2 more, which is not how this will be worded, but it was translated. 2 more to cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or more. So if you're running against someone who has snowlands, you play this card. If you're running against someone who's casting lots of expensive non-creature spells, you want to do this. So if they cast anything, you know, so essentially, their non-creature spells cost 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Nothing can cost, you know, 4, 5, or 6, just because, you know, it'll boost it up. No, sorry, not 6, 4 or 5. So yeah, this is a really good card. It also is just a 2/3 with vigilance and flying for 3. So if you're running this in a flyer deck, that's not bad, especially saying that, by the way, this is all asymmetrical. You can still run snowlands. You can still cast non-creature spells with CMC 4 or greater. It's opponents only. And then, on top of that, it's a Modal double face card. So it also has Radine's Shield. It's a 4-cost white legendary artifact, and it says whenever a source an opponent controls, so again, asymmetrical, deals damage to you or a permanent you control, it deals -1 of the damage instead. Okay, so now you're also sideboarding this in against a red deck that's going to want to kill you with a bunch of little 1 damage things. Like, think about it. If Cavalcade of Calamities was still in Standard, this destroys Cavalcade of Calamities. It says, nope, you don't deal damage. Plus, they're probably running a bunch of small little creatures. Obviously, when you throw in like Embercleave into that, it's a little bit different. But, you know, this sideboards against decks that run lots of little creatures. And then, whenever you or a permanent you control is targeted by a spell or ability that an opponent controls, that opponent may pay 1. If they don't, that spell or ability is countered. Okay, so what do you sideboard this in for? You sideboard it in to fight against snow decks, against expensive non-creature decks, to side it in against rush aggro decks, or to side it in against control decks. So you sideboard this in against any deck. And honestly, it counteracts so many things in a asymmetrical way. I could see people just running this card because at its worst, if your opponent is not running snowlands, they're not casting expensive non-creature spells, they're not hitting you with a bunch of small things, and they're not targeting your stuff, a 2/3 for 3 with flying and vigilance isn't bad. So yeah, I think I think this is an insane card. You know, it is going to see lots of play because it counters so many different things. It is the stacks card that is very versatile, and it counters a lot. So I think this is a really good card. I know I've talked about it for a while, but I just want to make sure you guys understand this card is insane in the amount of things that it counters. It has 4 different stacks effects, and you can kind of pick a set of 2. So yeah, if your opponent's running a snow control deck that wants to win by creating infinite 1/1 tokens, you know, they're not going to be able to do that. And so, yeah, very, very powerful card. Now, obviously, you can't have both sides, but if you do draw 2 of them, you can play one side and then play the other, which also alleviates some of the issue of running a legendary creature as a sideboard card because, if you draw multiple of them, it's kind of a dead card. No, you have to draw at least 3 of them for it to be a dead card. Insane. Next, we have this card, which is Carfell Port. It's a land, and you can tap. It enters the battlefield tapped. I don't know why that's not in the translation, but it does do that. And you can tap to add blue, and then you can pay 3 blue, black, black, tap, and sack it to mill 4 cards, and then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. All right, another insane card, very similar to the other port that we saw. You know, instead of tutoring for an aura or equipment, you know, not only do you just mill yourself, but you also return something, which is pretty crazy. I think that because these decks are normally a little bit longer game and are casting a little bit more expensive cards, I think that blue-black, you know, resurrection decks will run this card. They may even run 4 of them just because of how crazy it is to be able to just have a land, and if you run out of, you know, things to do in your hand, you can kind of use your lands as a backup. So yeah, I definitely think this card is really good and will be run in most, you know, blue and black reanimator decks, because normally they're not worried about 1 tap land or 2 tap lands. Next we have Ascendant Spirit. It's a 1-cost blue snow creature spirit, 1/1. Okay, so this one you can pay 2 snow mana, and it becomes a spirit warrior with base power and toughness 2/3. Then you can pay 3 mana, and if it's a warrior, meaning if it, you know, the first ability happened, you put a flying counter on it, which, by the way, flying counters are now a thing, which, I mean, they were a thing in Ikoria, but they were like a mechanic of Ikoria. And now just a random flying counter is on a random card. So kind of what I predicted back with Ikoria, I would not be surprised if these counters just become a normal thing in Magic. You know, you might just have 1 card in 1 set that has a flying counter on it, which it looks like this is going to be. But it also becomes a spirit warrior angel with base power and toughness 4/4. And then you can pay 4 mana. And if it's an angel, you get to put 2 counters on it, +1/+1, and it gains whatever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it's essentially leveling up. It goes from a 1/1 to a 2/3. To a 4/4 with flying, to a 6/6, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And so it'll have like 3 different types of counters on it. It'll have its power and toughness manipulated, and it has added rules text. So this, outside of digital, seems like a nightmare to keep track of, but I think it's very interesting that it has a flying counter on it. I'm surprised we didn't hear anything about this. I wonder if there will be some more info about whether these counters are just going to become a normal thing. And if they are, how are players expected to keep track of it? Because with Ikoria, they gave everyone the little cardboard cutouts and packs, but what are they going to do now? All right, next we have Poison the Cup. It's a 3-cost black instant, and it says destroy target creature if this spell was foretold scry 2. So yeah, this is, by the way, just purely better than Murder. So if you're running Murder in a deck and you pull one of these, replace it. But it has Foretell, so you can exile it and then pay 2 later. This is one of those cards where I think Foretell works really great. You may want to keep enough mana open to kill something at instant speed, but, you know, saving 3 mana is a little intense, especially saving 2 of it being black. So you can kind of, you know, you are paying more mana overall, but you can kind of save it for later, and you also get an added benefit. So even without the added benefit, I think this card would have been pretty good. But just the fact that you only have to hold up 2 mana now, and you're going to get to scry 2, pretty good card. Next we have Skemfar, Avenger. It's a 2-cost black creature elf berserker 3/1, and whenever another non-token elf or berserker you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. So really good in an elf deck, really good in a berserker deck. The fact that if your opponent removes a card, you replace the card, that is a really awesome effect. And yes, you are losing a life, but I don't think it's a real problem. I think if you're running a elf deck with black, you're running this. And if you're running a berserker deck with black, you're also running it. Next, we have Fearless Liberator. It's a 2-cost red creature dwarf berserker 2/1 with boast for 3. And you can create a 2/1 red dwarf berserker creature token. We're seeing a lot of these boasting of creating tokens, which is a lot more fair with boast because you do need to be able to attack. A 2/1 being able to attack and survive is very, very rare. And then you're also paying 3 mana for a 2/1. So I'll give it the same opinion I've given all the other boast cards. Pretty good if you can like make it unblockable, but again, not, you know, super great game breaking. Something kind of interesting you could try and do is give them flying or something weird. Next we have this card, which is Taunt the Trolls. It's a 4-cost red instant, and it deals 3 damage to any target. If a creature is dealt damage this way, it gets +5/+0 until end of turn. So the idea here is you can either use it as a kill spell, or if you have a creature that is going to survive it, you can give it +5/+0. The issue is your creature probably needs a pretty big amount of toughness to also be able to swing and not die. So you're probably throwing this on something that you don't care if it dies or you want to die, and then you get some big attack. I'm not a big fan of it. You can also do it at instant speed after blockers are declared, so, you know, if they decide not to block, then it gets +5/+0, but I would rather either deal 3 damage or give something +5/+0. I don't want to have to do both, and I'm just not a huge fan of this card. And next we have Not Vold Slumber Mound. It's a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for taps for red, so it's another one of these lands. And you can pay 6 mana and tap and sack it to destroy target land and create a 4/4 warrior creature, green warrior creature token, troll warrior creature token with trample. So they don't create it, you get to. So this one is one of the better ones in my opinion. I've said this about all of them. They actually all have insane effects. You actually notice they all replace themselves. The Boros colored one replaces itself with a tutored card. The Demirrowed one replaces itself by putting creature on the battlefield. This one actually replaces itself with a 4/4 and destroys an opponent's land. So not only are you both losing a land, you're getting something out of it as well. So yeah, all of these seem to replace themselves in some way, and this is really good. Again, if you're running a land destruction deck, you're probably running this just because, you know, you're probably a slower deck who can afford to play this tap land. Next we have Sirtland Frozen Flame. It is a land very similar to the previous one. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap to add a red to your mana pool, or you can pay 5 and tap and sack it to scry 2. Then this deals 2 damage to each creature, and then you can activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So this is one of the ones that doesn't actually replace itself, but I will say that a lot of people consider scrying 2 the same as drawing 1. It's not exactly the same thing, but you are probably killing one of your opponent's things, or at least dealing or maybe even killing multiple. So you're probably, if you're cracking this, going to trade at least. And so as long as you're not going down on card advantage, this is a really awesome card that can provide you some value early game and then trade out cards later on. Next, we have Tundra Fumarole. It's a 3-cost red snow sorcery, and it deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Add colorless for each snow mana spent to cast a spell. Until end of turn, you don't lose mana as this steps and phases end. Alright, insane card. Why? Because if you're running mono red, you can just swap out your lands for red red snow lands, and now you're dealing 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you're adding back 3 mana. Now, it is all colorless, so you probably do need some other red there. But I will also mention the fact that the mana it creates is snow mana. So if you have 3 of these in your hand, you cast 1, and you do need, you know, red mana, so I guess it can't train into each other. So I guess that's why it's double red there. But yeah, pretty insane. It also produces snow mana, so in a snow deck, this is pretty good. Yeah, pretty insane card. The fact that it can completely replace itself if you run snow lands, which doesn't seem like that big of an issue. Next, we have Skemfar Elder Hall. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap to add green. And you can pay 5 and tap to give up to 1 creature you don't control -2/-2 until end of turn. Then you create 2 1/1s, and you can only do this as a sorcery. So yeah, another one where you are probably trading this card out for an opponent's creature, and you're also getting 2 1/1s. So again, you're kind of trading this out for another card. These are acting very similar to Modal double face cards, except more actually traditionally, it'd be like Modal double face cards mixed with traditional double face cards, where they can be non-permanent on the other side. They can be kind of a spell, but you activate it later. So yeah, very interesting. Next, we have this one, which is In Search of Greatness. It's a 2-cost green enchantment. And it says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with mana cost equal to 1 plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control without paying the spell's mana cost if you don't scry 1. Okay, insane card. Absolutely crazy. Okay, if they didn't add that if not scry 1, it would not see too much play. But the fact is, you are paying 2 mana, and I know scrying 1 for 2 isn't insane, but if we're talking about like something like Commander here, that is not an awful spell to cast. You can, you know, set up your draws, but also you have a 0-drop, you can free cast a 1-drop. But by the way, you're going to have at least a 2-drop, so this enchantment, but you know, then you get a 3-drop, then you get a 4-drop, but maybe not. Maybe you have a creature that lets you manipulate this, like, I don't know, bouncing it back to your hands, and it does have to be exactly equal. But I think the fact that even if you don't have the card, you can scry and then maybe go get a card you can free cast is insane. Yeah, I think this card is really good. I don't know if it'll be broken in any way, but I think it'll be an insane value card, maybe not even in standard, but in something like Commander, this is a card to be feared. You know, you don't have to care about your colors at all. This is just, nah, I'm not a big fan of this. This is just a little much in my opinion. I think it could have been up to a couple CMC. Next, we have Clarion Spirit, which we saw yesterday. I don't know why it was there. Then we have this card, which doesn't have a translation here, but it is a 4-cost white and black enchantment saga, and it says create a 4/4 with flying and vigilance. So that's what its first step says, and then its second step says until end of turn, angels you control gain, tap, destroy a creature with lesser power than this creature. So if you create a 4/4, you can tap it to destroy something with power 3 or less. So yeah, pretty interesting. You can kind of swing, and since a lot of them probably have vigilance, you swing and then you tap them, making it so you're going to get this huge attack, and then you give all your angels double strike. Yeah, pretty insane. It basically says create a 4/4 for 4, so not bad, especially with vigilance and flying. And then you get a bunch of kill spells for free, assuming you have angels, and then they all gain double strike. So then now that your opponent has no creatures, you swing and hit them for a ton. So yeah, this is a very, very, very powerful card in an angels deck. If an Angels deck forms, this will be one of the key pieces towards winning in the deck. Yeah. Even if it's not, I mean, it's a 4-drop, create a 4/4, destroy something with power 3 or less, and, you know, probably hit them for 8 or 12. So, pretty good card. Next, we have Rune Crown. It's a 3-cost artifact equipment, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library, hand, and or graveyard for a rune card and put it onto the battlefield attached to Rune Crown. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. So a rune card, in case you didn't see, how they work is they can either enchant a creature or an equipment, but they can technically enchant anything. And if it enchants a creature, it gives the creature an ability. And if it enchants an equipment, it gives the equipment the ability to grant the ability that the rune does. And why you do that is that it's more resilient. They can't just blow up the creature and the rune goes away. They would have to blow up the equipment, which is a lot less, you know, good feeling to do. So yeah, I definitely like rune cards, and this is just an interesting kind of, I don't know, you can search your library. So this card, whatever the best rune card is, you know, this card can be anything. It gives it +1/+1, and your choice of ability would be my assumption based on runes. So I actually think this is a really awesome and fun card. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. I know it was a little bit longer than the others I've done recently, but there were a lot of interesting cards to talk about. I want to know what you guys think about all of the cards in the comments down below. You guys should also check out some of the links I put in the description. I know I don't shout this out this often, but I have a Twitter, I have a Twitch, which I like never use because I'd rather stream on YouTube, and I also have a Discord, which you guys should check out, where we talk all about Magic and custom cards and spoilers and all of that, so you guys should check that out as well. Again, like, subscribe. See you guys in the next one.